Boker Tov. Daf Yomi is Kesubos Daf. Yud Tesvav. Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos 15. We're going to start at the Mishnah on the bottom of Yudal and Amabez, where it says the Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Ma'isa Betinokes. There's an incident about a little girl, Sheyardo Malos Mayim Mina Ayin, that she went down to fill up the water from a spring. Benanza and Rahmano Itzla, and she was assaulted. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, so we want to know, is she still allowed to marry a Kohen? Because if she was assaulted by somebody who she's not allowed to marry, then she wouldn't be allowed to marry a Kohen. We also want to know if she was Rahmano Itzla impregnated by this person, if the child is Jew, what is the child's status? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan Nuri says, if the majority of the people in that town are able to marry the Kohen, then she could also marry a Kohen. So Rabbi Yochanan Nuri says we follow the majority. Up until now, we've been seeing a machokas in our tractate, in our chapter between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel says we assume the woman's presumptive status is the same, and therefore we believe a woman and we keep her presumptive status. Where Rabbi Yeshua says we don't keep her presumptive status and we don't believe the woman. And so if that's the case, why is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri saying it depends upon the majority principle? Who is this following? So I'm like, Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, the Amar Kaman. Who does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri rule like? If you want to say he follows the position of Rabbi Gamliel, then Afila Barov Psuin, Nami Mikasher, then even if the majority of the people there would be disqualified, Rabbi Gamliel says we still maintain the presumptive status. And Ika Rabbi Yeshua, and if it's like Rabbi Yeshua, which by the way Rashi is going to say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is going according to Rabbi Yeshua, then Afila Barov Ksher Nami Pasal, then even if the majority of the people are kosher, we would still not believe her presumptive status, and she would still be possible. She would still be disqualified. So Amarle, so comes along Rav Nachman in response to Rava's point, and he says, "Hachi Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav." He says, "No, we're following this whole Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is saying like Rabbi Yoshua, and this is what it's referring to. That this is what Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. So it says Rav Nachman, this is what Rabbi Yehuda taught in the name of Rav. Then what's this mission referring to? The Korono Shal Tzipori Hayemaisa. Where was this incident with this unfortunate Tinokes? It happened when it was the wagons of Tzipori. Could Rabbi Ami, like Rabbi Ami taught, Rabbi Ami, that there was a caravan of wagons passing through there. And so there now Rabbi Yehuda Rav is introducing the principle that Rabbi Yeshua says we do not believe her, we don't assume a presumptive status, and therefore we would say she's not kshera for the kuna, except in a circumstance where there are two majorities. There's a majority of people in the city, and there's a majority of the people passing through the city on a caravan. And so therefore, Ukad Rabbi Yanai, Dama Rabbi Yanai, Nevelas Bekrona, Kshera the Kahuna. That Rabbi Ami had said, Rabbi Yanai had said that if she was Nevelas on the Koronos, if she had the intercourse on the wagon, she would be Kshera for the Kahuna. The Gemara says it can't be that's how you translate the statement. Bekrona, so it can't mean actually on the wagons. That's not possible. El Nevelas B'Shas Koronos. If the intercourse happened, if the assault happened at the time when the wagons were passing through the city, then we're going to say she's kshera for the kuna. Then there's this double majority. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara explains, but if it had just been one majority, if it had just been the people, one man left this town in Tzipori, and he went and he assaulted her, then we're going to say that the offspring is a shasuki. Now we're going to say that the offspring, we don't know what the offspring is. And we're also going to say that this woman is no longer necessarily kshera for the kahuna. Like the following teaching that when Rav Dimi came, he said the name of Ziri Amar Chanina, Amar Ziri Amar Chanina. And some say it wasn't Rav Dimi bringing it, but it was just Ziri in the name of Rabbi Chanina. That Hochan Acharova Ir, Vein Hochan Acharova Seya. We follow the majority of the people in the city, but we don't follow the majority of the people in the caravan. And the Gemara assumes that this is a backward statement. Klape lie. This is backwards. Why? Because you have a principle in general and in principles throughout the Talmud that we say mechsa mechsa kavua. That in general we follow after the majority, but called a parsha meruba parsha. If you have a group and one of them separates from the group and goes into another group, we're going to say you assume we follow the majority of what had gone from that group. Let's say there would be a majority of pieces of kosher meat, and then they're in the city, and one of them fell out, and we can assume that a kosher piece of meat fell out. But if it would be kavua, but if it would be different stores, they're not intermingled with each other, and you go into one of those stores in the city, then even though the majority of them are kosher, if one of them is non-kosher, then we can't follow the majority there, because we say mechsa mechsa if it's 50. If we're saying that if it's kol kavua, mechsa mechsa dami, then anything that's fixed, if we don't want to give it a majority, we say it's like 50-50. And so in this case, why would we say this statement that we follow the majority of the city and we don't follow the majority of the caravan? It's just the opposite. The majority of the city is fixed, so therefore we shouldn't follow. But if the intercourse happened in the caravans, then we should say we follow the majority. So it doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says, so it says, why would we follow the majority of the city, not the caravans? The caravans are moving and the city is fixed. So rather, what must Zeiri have said in the name of Rabbi Chanina? We follow the majority of the city, but only when there's a majority of the caravan with it, and when the caravans are commuting through the city that day. So it's a double majority. You need a double majority. And we don't follow a simple majority of the city. So the Gemara says, okay, we understand why we don't follow the simple majority of the city because it's a fixed place and it's like 50-50. But why would we follow a majority of the caravans? Those are moving. So the Gemara says, my time, the reason is zero of seah to Rav Ha'ir. So because we might come, if we're going to follow the majority in the case where it was with somebody from the caravan, then we might come to follow the majority in the case where somebody from the city. Mar says, Nami, even the majority of the city, let's say this man from the city, he went and assaulted her. So then we're going to say, called the Parsh Meruba Parsh. Why don't we say that anything that's separated is separated from the majority? So it's not kol kavua kamechsal mechsadam. It's not a fixed case. He left the situation. No, we're talking about a case where she goes into the home of somebody from the city, and that's where the assault happens. Everything that's fixed is like a case of 50-50. So the Gemara says, okay, so you just said that in order to follow this case of the majority for this woman to assume she's share for the kahuna, you require two majorities: the majority of the people in the city, and the majority of the people in the caravan going through the town. So the Gemara says, do you really require two majorities? Vatanya, but we have a brayso. This is the famous case of the nine stores. This is the case that appears throughout Shas. We had this in Chum, we had this in Psachim, we had this in Nida. That let's say you have 9 shops. Of these 9 shops in the city, they all sell kosher meat. And one of the shops sells non-kosher meat. And you took the meat from one of the shops, and you don't know, you went into the store and you bought the meat, you don't know from which one, and you don't know from which one you bought it. So we're going to say, into those circumstances, sveko aser, that since it's a doubt, we're going to say it's prohibited because it's mechsa kavua dami. And so therefore we're going to say kol kavua mechsa dami, that everything that's fixed, it's like 50-50. You can't follow the majority, and we're going to assume it's prohibited. excuse me, ubenimtza, but in a circumstance where you didn't go into the store, but you just found it on the street. Halach achar harov. Then we follow the majority. And so there is only one majority. Why are we following the majority? To assume that the meat is kosher. And if you want to say b'she'ein dosos medina nu'uos, and if you want to say, well, it's because the doors to the city are not closed, and so therefore there are caravans passing through. The Gemara says, if you want to say the ein dosos nu'uos, so there's another group of people coming through, and so therefore we have a double majority. Rabbi Zera said this law applies even if the doors to the city are locked, and so therefore it's just a simple majority. You could still eat the meat. Gemara says so. When it comes to lineage, they're more strict than when it comes to the case of lineage, they're more strict than when it comes to the case of the kosher meat. By the lineage, we require a double majority in order to say she's shared for the kosher. When it comes to kosher meat, we only require one simple majority in the town. Gufa, Gemara analyzes the statement, anything that's fixed, we're going to say it's like 50-50, whether it's to be lenient, i.e., we'll see what that means, or to be strict. We understand what a strict means, to say that the meat's not kosher. So first, the Gemara says, what's the source for Rabbi Zera's statement that even to be lenient, we could say kol kavua kamechsal machsadami, anything that's fixed like 50-50. How do we say that? We know Rabbi Zera, where does he know this principle from? So the Gemara says, if you want to say from the case of mitesha chaniyos, from the 9 shops, they all sell kosher meat. Then one sells non-kosher meat. And you bought from one of them, you don't know from which one. And we say under those circumstances, sfeiko aser, and so we say, in that case, where you have the 10 stores and 9 sell kosher meat and 1 sells non-kosher meat. In that case, where you go into the store, you're going to say it's not, we can't eat it, but if you find it on the street, we're going to say it's kosher. That's not a proof, because Hasam Muchumra, that's only telling us to be strict. If you go into the store, you can't eat the meat. We want to know where you could say Kol Kavur Kamechsal Melsadami, even to be lenient. So maybe, says the Gemara, maybe it's from the case of the Tishat Svardaim, B'Sharetz Achabeinem. We know that there's a Sheretz, it's a toad, and that transmits the Tumah is a carcass to human and to utensils. And there's also a frog. A frog does not transmit the Tumah. So let's say you have 9 frogs, V'Sheretz Achabeinem, and there's one Sheretz that's amongst these frogs. Naga, and then you touch it, we're going to say Sveiko Tame, since they're all fixed, and so it's like 50-50, you're going to become Tame out of a doubt. But that's also Hasam Nami L'Chomer, that's also being strict. Ella, maybe it's from the following case, Tisha Shiratzim, it's a Fardei Achabenem, let's say you have the one frog amongst the 9 other Shiratzim, and you don't know which one you touched. So and you don't know which one you touched. If it'll be in the private domain, we say Tumah, ritual impurity in the private domain is Tameh. But if it'll be in the public domain, Sveiko Tahar. So then we're going to say that it's Tahor. So let's say you're in the public domain and you see a group of toads with one frog amongst them, and you touch it. You don't know which one you touched. We're going to say, if a doubt, you're Tahor. Gemara says, biblically speaking, how do we know this idea? So the Gemara is asking the question, biblically speaking, how do we know this idea that we've been discussing? That kol kavua is kamechsal mechsad. I mean, that anything that's fixed is like 50-50. Amar Kra, we're basing it on the verse where it says about the people who kill accidentally. It says in the verse, if there will be a man who hates his friend, and he lies in ambush, v'kamalav, he rises up against him and he strikes him down and kills him. Then he has to run to one of the Arya Miklat. So what do we learn from this pasuk? V'kamalav. What do we learn from that pasuk? he's only going to be liable if he actually has intent to kill that person. Just 1 second. Can hold it. What's your question, Bill?
You can hold it. It's all right.
No, it's okay. What's the question?
So I should know this by now because we've gone over this, as you said, in various tractates. But I still don't get the idea of the 50-50. It's mechsa means evenly balanced, which I take to mean like 50-50. But I don't understand why it's an uncertainty. I don't understand why the uncertainty is considered equally balanced when it's 9-1.
Right. So
If you understand my question.
Yeah, your question is an incredible question. It's a great question, and it's such a good question. No, really, nobody knows the answer to that. That this is a mystery, and people have made some suggestions over the years why there's a difference in this circumstance as applies the principles of majority. The simplest answer is just to say it is Gezeres HaKosav. It's just a tradition that this is what it is from the Torah or from the rabbis. If you want to read an article about this topic by our friend Donnie Kayastan, he wrote an article in Tradition trying to explain this. So if you ask that Donnie, he can give you his answer, and he has done some serious work in this. So we go on. So the Gemara says we want to know now. How do we know this basic idea that that if it's fixed, we're going to say, biblically speaking, it's like 50-50? How do we know that this is a biblical idea? Like Bill's saying, it doesn't make any, what's the logic for it? So we're saying it's midiaraisa, we know, and how do we know that this is a biblical idea? So Amar Kra, it's based upon the person who goes to the city of refuge. It says, V'aravo v'kamalav. He lay in ambush and he attacked him, meaning to say, then he doesn't get to go to the city of refuge. So what's the limitation? So it means to say that Rashi says it comes to exclude a person who wanted to kill this one and he ended up killing this other one. That you're only liable if you ended up killing the person who you intended to kill. But if you intended to kill one and you end up killing another person, you don't have the liability for killing that person. That's the first shita. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon in Masechet Sanhedrin. But the Rabbanan argue with him. Rabbanan Amid Bey Rabbi Yanai. No, they say no. Under those circumstances, you'd be liable. But where would you be exempt? Prato Zorik Evan Lago. That if you threw a stone into a crowd of people, and under those circumstances, you threw it into a crowd of people, and there were Canaanites and Israelites there. And there you wouldn't be liable because you didn't necessarily intend to kill an Israelite. But if you threw it against two Jews, even if you intended to kill one and you ended up killing the other, you'd still be liable. That's the position of the Rabbanan in the name of Rabbi Yanai. So the Gemara says, "Hey Chidami, what is the circumstance that we're referring to here?" If we're to say that there's 9 Canaanites and 1 Israelite amongst them, would we really need a verse to tell us that you're not liable? Typically, the Ruba Cananim Ninu. Obviously, you're not liable there. Majority of them are Canaanites. And Inami Palga. And even if it's 50-50, Safek Nefashos Lahakel. Even if it's 50-50, we're always lenient when it comes to a capital case, as Rashi says, because the verse says, Vitzilu Eida, you have to save the community. So what are we talking about here? So must be that what's the case talking about? Now we're talking about a case where there were 9 Israelites and 1 Canaanite amongst them. So the Canaanite is like a fixed person. And then we say, Kol Kavua Kamersal Mersal Dami. And we say each Kavua, each fixed one is like 50-50. And so therefore, in that case, you also wouldn't be liable. So if there's 1 Canaanite amongst the group and you throw it into the group and you weren't necessarily intending to kill this Jew, and you threw it into that group, we're going to say that maybe you were intending to kill the Canaanite and you wouldn't be liable for the murder. So, Im Arav Chia Bar Ashi Amarav Halacha Karav Yosi. So Rav Chia bar Ashi says in the name of Rav, the law is like Rabbi, Rabbi Yossi. This goes back to what we were saying before, that the law is like Rabbi Yossi, that if the most of the people in the city are kosher, then we're going to say that the tinokas is kshera for the kahuna. So that's what our Mishnah says. So he says that Rabbi Yossi cites this incident in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and we're saying the law is like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Chanan bar Rava says, "Amarav hara shai." No, in that case, it was a special incident in this situation and that's why that's why Rabbi Yossi said that we should share a bit for the kahuna. But in general, that's not the case. So the Gemara says, "Masav Rabbi Yirmiyah." So Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Gemara assumes that Rabbi Yossi does not require a double majority. So the Gemara says, "Well, Yochsin, well, Bayin and Trey Ruby." Didn't we just say this principle that Rav Nachman had taught us in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Marav that we require this double majority when it comes to lineage? The majority of the people in the town plus the majority of people walking through the town. But didn't we learn in the Mishnah Himachshion on top of Tesvav base? Let's say you find a child, that's cast into the city. If the majority of the people are idolaters, then we're going to say we're going to assume the child is an idolater. Imrov Yisrael, if the majority of the people in town are Jewish, we're going to assume the child is Jewish, Yisrael. Mechsa, if it's 50-50, we're going to assume that the child is going to be Yisraelite Jewish. And so why do we say that we assume that the child is Jewish for these cases if it's 50-50? So we assume the child is Jewish, meaning to say that we have to support him and educate him, but it doesn't mean he can marry another Jew or marry a Kohen. Shmuel says, no, what does it mean that we assume he's Jewish? So Shmuel says that it means he's Jewish, that if it's Shabbos, you violate the Shabbos to save him. You remove the stone off of the well or the rubble to save him. So we see from here that you don't require a double majority, you just require a single majority. So how can we say the law is like, and so how could Rav Chanan bar Abba say in the name of Rav that the law is that it was just a Rasha? So therefore, so we see from here. So Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying why don't we require two lineages? Here we see that even though there's a simple majority, that it's not enough for Yochasin. So how can you say that we will like Rabbi Yossi, that we follow a simple majority for lineage? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yirmiyah Ishtamite, he didn't realize Adam Rabbi Yehuda Rav. He didn't realize this other statement that we said in the name of Rav. What was the other statement that we said in the name of Rav? Which we start off our discussion today, that the Corona Shal Tzipori having Maisa. That what's the reason why we passed that Rabbi Yossi ruled that it was permitted? Because it was in the carriages of the wagons of Tzipori were passing through. And so therefore, since the wagons of Tzipori were passing through, it's a double majority. And so we see for Yochasin, we require a double majority. And says the Gemara, according to Rav Chanan bar Rava, who says, so what's the reason why Rabbi Yossi allowed it? It was not because it was a double majority, it was just because it was a very special time. There were extenuating circumstances, meaning to say that otherwise it would be prohibited. So if that's the case, kasha. So if that's the case, it's going to be a difficulty from Rav's position on the child who was found cast into the city, because there Rav says you're only allowed to keep him alive, but you're not allowed to marry him. And here under this case, Rav Hanan bar Rava is saying that it was Horah Shah, meaning to say, because for Yochsin, how can Rav Chanan bar Rav say that you don't need two majorities, whereas for Yochsin you require two majorities? And where it says Man Masniha, well Masniha, that one who taught this teaching that Rav said it was Horah Shah, Well, he's not. It's a different person than the one who said that. Rav says that incident from the children Sipori happened with a double majority. So there's two different two different circumstances, two different people teaching it, and so therefore this person understood that the incident in Sipori was with one majority, and that's why Rav says it was Hora Shah. But for generally speaking, you require two majorities. And that's consistent with the position of Rav about the Mishnah with the child who was found in the city, because that he says we don't want to buy it for Yuchsim because there's only one single majority there. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this case of where the child was cast into the city. If you find this child cast into the city, the majority of the people are idolaters, we're going to say Ovei Kochavim. We're going to say that we're going to assume the child is an idolater. Yisrael, the majority of people are Israelites, we assume the child is a Jew. Mechsal, the majority, if it's 50-50, Yisrael. And Rav taught, so that's only to feed him and educate him. But for lineage, we're not going to be able to marry him on the basis of this 50-50. So the Gemara says, Shmuel says it's to violate the Shabbos to save him. Gemara says, first of all, does Shmuel really say this position? Does Shmuel really say that only if it's a child that's found in a place where the majority of are Jews, can you save him on the Shabbos? But if it's 50-50 or majority idolaters, you can save him on the Shabbos. You can't violate the Shabbos to save him. Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says when it comes to pikuach nefesh, when it comes to saving life, we don't follow the majority. Even if it's a small minority, we would go out of our way we would have to violate the Shabbos to save him. So this teaching that Shmuel taught, this refers to the first cause of the Mishnah. If the majority of them are idolaters, then we're going to assume he's an idolater for what purpose? And Shmuel says, and Shmuel says, yeah, we're going to assume there's an idolater, but when it comes to saving a life on Shabbos, we're going to remove the stone to save his life, because there's a minority possibility that he's Jewish, and even under that small possibility, we're going to have to violate the Shabbos. So the Gemara says, and what about the next statement? It states also in the first cause of our Mishnah, so if that's the case, so what was it teaching according to Shmuel? If Shmuel says this doesn't apply to saving his life, so if the majority of them are idolaters, so what's it coming? Then he's an idolater. For what purposes do we say he's an idolater? So Amar Papa, it means to say that you're allowed to give him non-kosher food. The majority of the people in the town are idolaters, and you find this baby, you can feed him non-kosher food. Amar Papa, so if that's the case, what about the next cause? Imrov Yisrael. If the majority of the people, what would Shmuel say in that circumstance? The majority of the people are Jewish, we assume he's Jewish. So again, for what purposes? So Amar Papa, now we have to return a lost object to him. You have to go out of your way. You're obligated to return a lost object to a Jew. So that's what. If the majority of people in town are Jewish and you find the child, you have to return a lost object to him. Mechsa, but if it's 50-50, we're going to view as Israel. Well, what does that mean? So for what degree do we view him as a Jew if it's 50-50? So the Gemara says, for damages. Because as Rashi says, we learn in Baba Kama, but as Hashem Yisparach will come and learn this together, that let's say you have an Ashur Shal Yisrael, let's say you have an ox of a Jew who gores the ox of a Canaanite, the Jew is exempt. And the ox of a Canaanite that gores the ox of a Jew, then whether it's Tam or whether it's Muad, he has to pay full damages. Well, if it's a Yisrael to Yisrael, a Tam pays half damages and a Muad pays full damages. So Rish Lakish says if it's 50-50, we view him as a Jew with respect to damages. And Mar says, wait 1 second. What's the circumstance? If you want to say if the Jew's ox gores this found kid's ox, why can you assume he's a Jew? He should say, I see Raya. The Jew will say, then bring me a proof you're Jewish, and you'll take and you'll take your money. So you have to bring me a proof. So the Gemara says, if his ox gores our ox, so then if we say he's an idolater, he has to pay full damages. If we say he's a Jew, he has to pay half damages. So we say under those circumstances, there we view him as a Jew to his detriment. We say pay the half. No, we say in this case the detriment to the person who was gored, or whose ox was gored. We say palgam masham. We say you pay the half damages to the found kid. On the other half, he says to them, the found kid could say to the Jews, I see right the Lav Yisrael, and you bring me a proof that I'm not a Jew, I'll give you the rest of your money. Okay, so now we come to that. We've finished the first chapter, and God willing, we will continue with this chapter continue with this beautiful Masechta of Kesubos.
Yeshakah.